all I was paying attention to was the subject in front of me, usually a bird, and it was just all about photograph that bird, photograph that bird.
And the goal was to shoot it so that the head, the eye, the bill are all sharp, which this one is, and then I just wanted it to melt away after that.
Hey, welcome everyone this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. It's Ray here with Scott Keys, as always.
Hey now.
All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about how we were all beginners once. We want to discuss some commonly overlooked things and some things to think about that might improve you in your starting out, as you're learning all this. So a couple things to mention about this. We've all been through this. It's a learning process. We all start at the same place, not knowing much, and it takes some time to get to where we are now. We were wildly inconsistent in the beginning when we started out, and at least for myself, I was occasionally making a great image, but more often than not, I wasn't. And if you're like me, in the beginning, I thought I was great. I really thought I knew what I was doing. I was making great images. It's because I didn't know any better. You can't really know what makes a great wildlife photo until you learn all the different things that can be fixed and the things that are in your control. And that really takes a lot of time in my experience. I also want to mention, if you're just a casual photographer and you just enjoy getting out, then this is probably not the episode for you. We're going to be concentrating a little bit more on the photographer who's really looking to grow as a wildlife photographer. And if that fits you, then maybe just try and keep some of the topics that we mentioned tonight in mind when you're shooting, and hopefully they'll help you improve a little bit quicker than it did for me, taking years and years and years. So the last thing I want to mention is keep in mind that many of the topics we're going to talk about tonight, they take a lot of time to learn. So just because you're aware of them now doesn't mean you're going to instantly go out and make the most amazing photos. But if you keep working these topics and using these techniques, they should help you out in the future. So having said all that, let's jump right into it. I'm going to hand it over to Scott.
Yeah, and just a couple reminders for the people that are still tuning in on Facebook. We're going to do this at least one more time on Facebook, and then we set up the YouTube channel. So we have about 130 subscribers. That's really nice. We were looking to get about 150 to 200 before we switch over. So if you haven't subscribed yet, or if you're listening to this on the recording, hopefully you'll subscribe so you'll get the notification. So make sure you flip over. Ray's going to put it in the comments as a link, so you can just click the link and head over.
I just dropped the link in.
So anyway, I wanted to start. We're going to go over a couple concepts today: light, perspective, overcropping, sharpening. All the things that tend to make our photos really not be what we want them to be when we're starting out. But I have a quick story. So how I got into this whole thing is a picture that Ray's going to pop over and show you. So I'm at a soccer game, and I just purchased a new camera. I purchased a 300 millimeter lens to watch my boys and to record them playing soccer. And we were walking out of a soccer stadium, and there's this little bird like chasing everybody around. I just thought it was funny. Here's this bird, and he's just like literally chasing everybody. I had no idea what the bird was. I didn't know anything about birds. I took a picture of the bird because I thought it was funny. And then I got home, and I didn't notice the eggs that were under the bird. And I thought it was really amazing. Like, I had always liked nature, but I was never into birds to the degree that I am now. So I didn't know what the species was. I had no idea. This is also a great example of something that a lot of people do when they're first starting, which is make really bad processing decisions. Yeah. So I converted it to black and white. I made the red eye on the killdeer stand out.
Oh, that's a classic and then beginner I highlighted maneuver the eggs. Right
what
there.
Was cool. Yeah. What was cool is I didn't know there were eggs there when I was there, and it just it made me start to look around my environment a little bit more and start to get into birds. About a couple months later, this was in 2013. A couple months later, I was up at Bake Oven Knob, and I was with my kids, and we were going to do like hawk watching. And it's kind of funny because there's a couple people out there laughing when I tell you that in June, I was going to do hawk watching. That's like literally the worst time of year to hawk watch.
Nice.
And there were no hawks up there, and I'm like, shit, it's called Hawk Mountain. Shouldn't there be like hawks flying all over the place? And as we were leaving, this little zebra bird popped up. I had no idea what it was. I think I called it a zebra bird. And
It's appropriate.
this is the first picture I had ever taken of a warbler. And so it holds a special place in my heart, even though it's not a great photo. I still love looking at it and just kind of remembering back when I started. The interesting thing is, if I show you this killdeer, that's the first picture I ever took. And then here's a killdeer I took last year.
Slight improvement,
You can
Scott.
see what happens as you grow and change your photography. And then if I show you this black and white warbler, which was the first picture I ever took, basically just pointing at the camera and shooting it, versus the black and white that I have as a contest entry in some contests this year, you could see the difference. So the first concept that we really wanted to focus on, and I have 3 rules in bird photography that I talk about all the time. The first one, and I always think it's the most important, is light. So in the beginning, typical photography revolves taking pictures of anything you see any time of day. So you can see that this picture, it's a chestnut-sided warbler. It's really not a horrible image. I mean, the composition's not awful. The background's a little busy. He's got worms in his mouth. I was just loving this at the time.
Yeah.
Like, I thought, this is the coolest picture. Like, he's got 3 worms in his mouth. But then when you look at the difference light makes, and I have another example of a chestnut-sided warbler in much softer light, much more pleasing. There's no harsh shadows from sticks and leaves. To me, that makes a world of difference.
It's night and
so,
day.
yeah, I have because light is such a big topic for us. We have a lot of examples we're going to show on each subject, but light is going to consume a few of them. And really, we're just showing our own images. Most of mine are from 2013, 2014. And then we're going to kind of go through different topics. So this is a black-throated green warbler. The light here is not actually awful, but one of the things that you'll notice is the entire side is in shade. To compensate, I did some horrible processing. You see this big blob on his eyeball? That was me trying to add catch light, which wasn't very effective in 2013. And now the black-throated green warblers, you'll see a difference here.
Yeah,
again,
nice.
in the much softer light, real clean backgrounds. And this is the difference in light. I shoot a lot of overcast songbirds. I like to get a sense that there's not sun on them. So it's either in shade or overcast. Here's one that's got a little bit of sun filtering through the forest, but it's a dense forest, so it's pretty well shaded. Another black-throated green. And then this is really woodsy feeling, like really dark. I like this feel for warblers, especially the warblers that are the deep wood warblers, like these black-throated greens.
Yeah. Hey, Scott, we do have a question.
Sure.
Ann Hope asks, do you guys use food to encourage birds to perch on a specific branches? Go ahead.
Yeah, unless it's at a feeder.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't know how you would lure, especially songbirds.
Yeah, they're mainly insects and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I mean, unless you had a lot of mealworms, and I guess it could work.
Yeah.
But yeah, the answer would be no. And neither Ray or I do any. I don't do a lot of owls. Owls are really tough unless you bait them, and I don't bait. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a no for me.
I do want to let you guys know that for some of my warbler photography, not all of it, I do use minimal call playback. But the key is it's very minimal. It simply gets the bird in the area occasionally. It doesn't always work. And, you just don't go in and play things nonstop. So, I do use that as a tool. And then Alejandro asks, what ISO are you shooting these at? I don't know if Scott can answer these, but I assume they're kind of all over the place. That's what mine are anyway when I'm shooting warblers.
Yeah. So the last one I'm showing, and really good call from Alejandro, this is at 1100 ISO, and the shutters are going to be a little bit slower. So we actually had a concept that we were talking, maybe we'll do a topic on soft light or low light photography, where the shutter speeds are a little bit slower, but kind of explain like what we're thinking about. But even at 1/200th of a second, this bird is singing, so there is some movement involved, and the bill is still sharp, and you would expect to see a little bit of blur around there.
Yeah.
So I think it's in pretty good shape there. When you start getting below 1/100th of a second, you really are pretty slow.
Yep.
And songbirds are going to be super tough. at 1/200 to 2/50th is about the floor of my shutter speed on those.
One more question. We got a lot of great questions coming in. Alex Shepard
Yep.
asks, "What is the primary focal length?" Hang on, the question's going away. What is the primary focal length used for most of the pictures? Also, how much cropping do you usually perform? Scott and I both shoot a 500 millimeter f4 prime, Nikon's lens, and cropping is anywhere from no cropping at all to, I don't know, for me it's probably like maybe 20, 30, 35% of the image cropping in on it. We both try not to crop too much, and that's actually something we're going to talk about in a little bit. So we'll hit that topic again.
Yeah, and I would say 50% crop is like the max, and only if there's super detail, like only if everything was really perfect as far as sharpness and detail.
Yeah, and we got one more question coming in. What about off-camera fill flash? Do you guys use it? Neither Scott or I use fill flash for our warbler photography, our songbirds. We know we have a couple of friends that certainly do, and they use it to create effect. It's just not our personal preference. So all the images you're going to see today that have songbirds in it are all just natural light. So.
Yeah, and it's absolutely personal preference because I know 3 guys that use fill flash, and I would say they're all excellent songbird photographers.
All right, we got great questions coming in. Just a couple more here, Scott, and then we'll move on. Chuck
Sure.
asks, is the VR on, and do you use a tripod? Which Heather also asked, or I'm sorry, Steve also asked, based on the shutter speeds, you're using a tripod or hand holding in these. Scott, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, so a lot of times with songbirds, I shoot from my car. I'll try to pull off near the sides of the roads where I see activity. So I'm not using a tripod. I'm either using a monopod or I'm balancing it on the window. I don't have any fancy contraption to hold it there. I think, and this is just me speculating, I think sometimes we overvalue how a tripod stabilizes an image. And I know some people are like cringing and saying, "Oh my God, it's absolutely necessary. You have to do it."
I second
Yeah,
that,
if you're shooting super slow shutter speeds under 1/100th, then yeah, it probably is something that's needed. So yes, VR is on mine when I'm under, or I think I'm going to be under 1/500th of a second. I use VR, and if I get over that, I typically don't.
Yep. Yeah,
Yep.
same here.
And then
So.
Tracy made
ahead.
Tracy made a comment about the tripod being difficult to move around, and that's the whole point with songbirds is they aren't in one spot all the time. They're going to move, so you kind of have to have some flexibility. The monopod offers that when I'm standing, and if I'm just using my car as a blind, then I'm just straight out the window.
There you go. Cool. All right.
Yep. All right, I'll go a couple more. I have some waders I wanted to show, and this is an example of a couple of awful things. This is from 2013. Again, this is at that point where I was just taking pictures of anything that moved. So flying away, the light is really strong. The whole bottom's in shadows.
Nailed those
not
wings.
super, yeah, not super pretty. This is a great egret. I didn't have a recent great egret. I just realized I see a lot of them, and I stopped taking pictures of them. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to get some new ones. Snowy egrets I like a little bit better. So
They're
I do
more
have a few
exciting,
snowy egrets. Here you can see like what a difference the nice soft light makes
Yeah.
in the morning, reflected off the water. And this is another one from a recent trip. I was out in
man.
Arizona.
Love that
This
one.
guy just flew in. Really nice morning light, and that background, kind of that chocolatey leather background really worked for me.
It's a classic Scott background there.
Yeah. And then this is more
Hey, yeah.
harsh light.
So this is a beginner photographer's like best bird. I know
Yeah.
everybody I know in the beginning, and myself included, are like, you see a great blue heron, you just shoot that thing like crazy, no matter what light and horrible background it is. And yeah, go ahead and tell us about this one, Scott.
Yeah. So this was a day, again, it was probably in mid-morning, but like several hours after sunrise, direct sun, shadows are strong. I actually printed this the first year I was doing
Nice.
photography. I thought it was so cool. And one of the things I kind of wish we had this. We read an article recently that we all shared amongst a group of us, and many of you might have seen it, but it was about how beginners overvalue their talent and how they think
Yeah.
they're good.
Yep.
And the more you learn, the more you realize you suck.
Yeah.
And I think, at this point I was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm getting pretty good at this. And then you realize as you start to see other people and you start to learn more about yourself, you just realize you have a long way to go. And not that the next image is perfect by any means, but in nice, this is kind of an overcast light with a nice background. You see all the features and the details, and it's just so pleasing. And again, I'll just go back and compare the light to this, which is really strong, a lot of shadows. You can't even see the eye very well because it's in shadow. So yeah, pretty big difference. And then here's some more waders. These are oyster catchers. I was just so excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ray, I think this may have been the day we met. I'm not 100%
Oh, yeah,
sure.
Barnegat? Nice. Okay.
Yeah, I think this might have been the day we met.
Yeah.
So you could see like the strong light. One side's completely in shadow. One side's in sunlight. The next one's even
Background is super
worse
distracting.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's another example, 2014, probably the same bird. I think I was in the water, which I thought was really cool at the time. You know, I'll be a wildlife photographer and get in the water.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter what you do in this light. It's not pleasing. You look at the same species on the Jersey Shore, and then you get this taken like 10 minutes, 15 minutes after sunrise, the little feathers falling down, and you just see the difference, and you're like, wow, what a difference that hour makes in the morning when you're shooting in this perfect light.
Yeah, and then
I'll go through
an example of showing, you know, I don't know if you were in the water or not, but if you were, this is actually taking advantage of being in the water versus that last photo.
Yeah. I've got a couple more here. I got a couple more like shorebirds now. This is a Sanderling. I think I was on vacation for this and saw this guy. I thought it was really cool at the time with all these sparkly things in the background. Then you start to see what really good light looks like. And here's another Sanderling from last year, these little bubbles and really pleasing. The background just melted away, but it's all just really soft. Here's a harsher light. This was actually still in the morning.
That's still not bad.
I think I remembered. Yeah, it's not awful.
No.
But when you look at the light, it was a little stronger than I'd like. Yep. And then you see like this is really softer and just a little bit more pleasing.
Yep.
And then there's a golden legs coming up. Again, kind of strong light. The background really, you see the sun hits all this light stuff.
Not
and
helping
it's
it.
Black and muddy. There's not much good about that one. And then this one.
That's so nice.
Pretty big difference.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at that same species to that, it's just a really big difference.
And lighting.
A few more here.
Really makes a big difference there.
Yeah, there's a night heron. This was like in the middle of the day. I just saw it down there and I just had to go take a picture. I tried to do the right things in terms of getting low, getting a little bit more eye level. I was starting to focus on things like that, but the light was just not right. And then you see light like that, and you realize that the picture you took 3 years ago, you just throw it in the scrap heap.
Yeah, for sure.
Said avocet, same thing, mid-morning, kind of strong light. I was just happy to see avocet, so I liked this picture. And then you get this kind of light where it's just, you know,
it's incredible.
Night and day.
Yeah, for sure.
A couple more. Somebody asked about waterfowls. Did you want to address that one?
Yeah, sure. Alex asked, do you ever use blinds for photographing waterfowl such as ducks? Yes, we certainly do. I don't think, Scott and I both are in and out of them for different species and different locations, but when applicable, using a blind certainly does help. And if you want to, Alex, go back and revisit the past episode where we talk about getting close to wildlife, we visit that topic a little bit more in depth.
Awesome. Speaking of waterfowl, there's a couple. This is a wood duck I got a few years ago. First time getting close to wood ducks. So the light here was not available in the morning. The sun was out bright, so I kind of took what I could get. And at this point, I knew it wasn't what I wanted. But here's another, just a duck that I wanted to show. This is a scoter, but it was, again, like really strong light, not flattering. Perspective also not really good. And then here's some wood duck images. Again, let me just flash back to this wood duck.
Yeah.
And look at the difference in light to that wood duck.
Yep. That
wood duck, great light, nice light. And then this one is completely overcast, so you can see the snow. So there's actually clouds, full clouds on this one.
Yeah.
So golden hour will soften it and give you more pleasing light. And then sometimes overcast conditions on certain species will also be very advantageous.
We got a couple more questions coming in.
Sure.
You guys are giving us some great questions tonight, so thank you so much. This is really what we've been looking for. Nicole asks, she says, are there any tips for shooting in harsh lighting? So, number one, I would say try as much as possible not to. But we totally understand that not everybody has as much time as either Scott or I do to be out in the field, and sometimes you might have your one Saturday off, and it's a blazing sun day, and you just want to spend as much time out there. So, in those circumstances, I would say when the light gets too strong to use it creatively and it becomes harsh, I would say try to either find some shade for your subject or try to always have the sun at your back. I'm a big fan of using many different light angles with the sun and not always having the sun at your back and just doing front light. But when the light is really harsh, that can be the kind of only way to take advantage of it and try to minimize those harsh shadows. So those would be my suggestions. Do you have any suggestions to add to that, Scott?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that's going to happen in direct sunlight is you're going to get shadows from everything, especially sticks and leaves, and that's not going to be pleasing. So if you can find a subject that may be in a less cluttered environment,
Yep.
it might be easier. So something on the ground, waterfowl would probably work. They don't look as nice, but again, you can make it work if you're in a low perspective. But yeah, if you're in the trees with those subjects, you're going to see shadows and leaf hotspots everywhere, and it's really tough to deal with. Even if you're a great Photoshop editor, it's still really tough to deal with those conditions.
Here, I have a great example. You just made a great point, Scott. Sometimes if you go to an open area, here's a snowy egret I shot in the middle of the day, high noon sun in the middle of the summer. I was actually only out scouting, but I couldn't resist the photo. So there was really shallow light sand underneath the water, and it was actually reflecting a ton of that light back up. So you can see right here, there are definitely some shadows underneath of there, but they're not that strong because there was a ton of light reflecting up off the water and the bright sand underneath. So it actually made it work. If that wasn't the case there, the shadows would have been so harsh and it would have been really bad, and I would have just kind of bagged that shot and probably not even taken it. Let's see.
Alejandra asked,
Yeah, go ahead.
made actually a perfect comment. And I can't believe I blew the opportunity to mention this, but she said when it's super bright, she likes to shoot raptors and birds in flight, and that's a really great call out.
Certainly.
Anything, because your shutter speeds are going to be very, very fast.
Yep.
So action photos. I saw an osprey. It was like midday and it was really bright out, but I saw an osprey hovering over a lake, like a really small one the other day. And I actually pulled over, even though I wouldn't normally shoot in those lighting conditions, because I knew that I could get a super high shutter speed
Yeah.
and maybe create a really interesting action shot. So great call out.
Excellent. Melissa Easter also says, she says, wow, I guess I have to start paying attention to light and backgrounds now, along with shadows. I still just get so excited that I fire off shots. And that's exactly what we all do as a beginner. And you know what? Honestly, still to this day, I still do that. If I get a brand new species that I've never photographed before, you just get excited and all your thinking goes out the windows and you just start pointing and shooting. And what starts to make a difference and what we want you to concentrate on, especially if you are a beginner, is to start thinking about it a little bit more and think about some of the things we're mentioning. So back to you,
Yep.
Scott.
Awesome. Let me just go through a couple more waterfowl examples. This was a common merganser. I'll show you just an example. You can see like the whites are really bright. There's some stuff in the background here, so not a great image. But look at how much different this soft light is on the same species a few years later. I actually did 3 mergansers, so I have 3 different lighting styles. So this is kind of this would be like my classic style. This was a high key take I had on an overcast day. I thought I could take advantage of it. And then this one was taken in brighter light. It's not awful, but this is a technique you can use on when you expose for the whitest part of the bird against a darker background. Sometimes it'll black it out and you'll get these kind of dramatic images. So that's another technique that you can do. I think I just have 2 more examples. This is a common loon from a few years ago. I loved this at the time because I was just excited to see a breeding loon. Really liked this one. I actually taken at the same lake. I took this last week. This was completely overcast, cloudy in the morning, but it really created a nice soft effect, and you can still see all the details. There's little water droplets on the head. And then birds in flight, just be careful with direction of the sun. So this one I liked because it was close when I was first shooting, but you could see all the shadows below it, and it's a neat pose. But when you look at these raptors in later,
Yeah.
this was right before sundown, you will lose to that point earlier about shutter speed. This is at 1/640th of a second. So you'll start to pick up motion blur on the wingtip sometimes when you lower your shutter. So it's a trade-off. You're going to get better, more appealing light. Pete made a comment earlier about full frame camera bodies, and that is one of the biggest advantages of a full frame body is that this same image on a full frame body, I probably could have pushed the shutter up almost twice as fast and still had the same amount of noise in the image. So there is an advantage. I shoot a crop sensor, so I'm a little bit more concerned with the noise. I try to keep it on the D500. I try to keep the noise under 1600.
But Scott's always quick to show me when we're shooting side by side how much closer his image is, so you get that.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. I get closer and
As
Ray
with
gets
most
better
things.
quality and less noise.
It's a trade-off for sure. So.
Yeah, and then Ray, that's all I had under light. I know
Okay,
you had
cool.
a couple different topics.
Yeah, so let's switch gears a little bit here, and let's talk about foregrounds and backgrounds and what you see. And if you're looking at this image right now, I just want to let you know I actually shared this image. So for whatever reason at the time, I thought this was a image worth sharing. Let's see when I took this. This was back in 2009, so pretty early in my career, but so this has a lot of things going on. It's got horrible light that Scott was just talking about, and just the branches are atrocious. So, skip forward 7 or 8 years, and then I create an image like that of the same species. So that's another white-throated sparrow. Obviously, a little bit cleaner, a little bit nicer light, and I'm paying a lot more attention to a lot of different things there. So again, watching their foreground here. Here's that great blue heron that I talked about. Everybody loves seeing those as a beginner, but there's branches in the way. And some of these branches you can kind of get away with. They kind of go around the bird's body, but these right here, going right over the beak, a simple step to my left or raising my camera up just a foot would have cleared those. And those are things you should start to pay attention to. Personally, myself right now, I wouldn't even take this shot. And here's another wonderful example of just a really rough background of this white ibis, so it's a clear view to the bird, but the background is just so distracting. The light is overcast. It's not horrible, but the bird really does not stand out here. Whereas, again, skip forward a few years now, the bird's really standing out. It's got really nice light. There's some behavior as it's feeding going on here. And then you can go take it a step even further and just have completely clear, nothing in the way, really nice light, and the bird just jumps out at you. So just to kind of show you the difference of, hang on one second here, there we go. Between those two photos there, it's kind of night and day. So let's see, we've got a couple more questions here. Laura asks, are any of your newer photos with the beautiful backgrounds post-processed at all, or is that all right out of the camera? Laura, all of our photos are post-processed. We definitely work on these, but what we don't do is we don't blur the background or anything like that. I will personally remove some minor distracting objects. If there was like one tiny branch or something like that, I'll definitely do that, but it's not a huge departure from the original image. So the big difference between these older crappy photos like I'm about to show you right here of this pine warbler with this just horrible light, really super busy background, and the one that I just shot a couple of weeks ago with Scott is it's all about the clean background, the clean perch. So this is much nicer light. The background was really far away. I did actually remove, there was one little branch of leaves over here in the background that I didn't particularly like, so I did remove that, but the rest of this image is as it was shot. So that kind of answers that question. And here's another example of a pine warbler on a really great lichen-covered tree. And again, just to show you the difference there when you start paying attention to your foregrounds and backgrounds. That's one I took many years ago, and that was actually the first, I think that may have been the first warbler I ever photographed. I know it was definitely the first pine warbler. And these are a couple of images I just created in the past week and a half or so. And let's see, here's another thing. Oh, so yeah, one other topic I wanted to mention. Scott, did you have anything you wanted to mention on those, or you're good to go?
Yeah, just a couple little things. there's for people that are just beginning, I've actually had a conversation in several occasions where people will say things like, I like my images to be as I saw them right out of the camera. So when you process an image, there's a couple things. There's contest editing, which means you're only allowed to do certain things like dodging and burning, lightening a little bit. You can play a little bit, but it pretty much has to look like the original out of camera image. But keep in mind, every camera takes the same image differently. If you use a Nikon or a Canon or a Fuji or Olympus, the same image taken at the same time is going to look differently. It's just the way it's a computer inside, and it's editing as you're doing it. So what Ray and I and most photographers do is we shoot the raw image, which has less detail available, and then we try to get it where we want it, still keeping the integrity of the image. So that's kind of what a contest entry would look like. If you enter a contest, they may actually say, we want to see the original, the raw file out of camera, and make sure that it's within the specs. And for those images, you can't do branch removal, you can't do anything. When Ray and I are editing, and a lot of people are editing, we don't consider like a minor branch removal to be different than what we really see the image to be. So I say it's fair game when we do those little things. If anybody asks, we would always disclose it. I mean, It's not like we try to hide anything.
Nope. Yeah.
But the processing is a key part. If you look at some of the other videos that Ray's done and I've done, you can see there's some we both have channels separate from the Wildlife Inspired channel, and you can see how we edit and what we do. And a lot of times we'll do like a before and after, so you can see like, oh yeah, I get it, I see the difference in these images. So yes, there's definitely editing. And then with setups, I was asked the other day, like, do you create these environments kind of like a studio? And I've seen pictures like behind the scenes where I was kind of surprised. I thought this person was taking all these birds in the tropics in the wild, and actually they have a blind setup with 10 different perches and feeders and bananas on the ground and, attracting the birds to where they were. And the images come out beautiful, but it's really staged. And so what Ray and I, because I shoot with them a lot, I could speak for both of us on this.
Yeah.
We will not create a studio for birds, but we will do light staging. So what I mean by that is, if there's a branch on the ground that looks like it's going to be a good perch, we may place it in an area hoping that we're going to get a bird on it, but it's not like we clear cut the whole area and put one stick in the ground. So I try to especially really like to get them in their natural environment. I don't want to see a bird on a perch that isn't even in their habitat. That just looks funny. It might make for a great looking picture, but to me, it just doesn't feel true.
Natural,
so yeah, we both shoot in the natural environment, if anybody is wondering.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so another topic I wanted to talk about was, as a beginner, it's really tough and it takes a while to get close to wildlife, so you end up overcropping a lot. So just as an example here's a yellow rump warbler I shot. Again, so a lot of these topics kind of overlap here. So horrible light, horrible background, but if you check out the crop here, so I cropped the heck out of this photo. So that's the full photos kind of zoomed 1-to-1 pixels on my screen. It came out to around 2300 by 1500 pixels. Not that those pixels really matter specifically that much, but you can just kind of see how it fills the screen here. So I cropped the heck out of it. It wasn't close, so there's not a lot great about this photo. Here's one I just took the other day. Here it is 1-to-1. It's pretty much filling my screen. So this bird came in to the minimum focus distance to me, and I had been laying on this rocky shoreline along a creek photographing a different bird, but I was laying there for 3 hours. A flock of these yellow rump warblers came through, and the bird just naturally kind of just bounced on the ground and walked right up to me. I actually had to scoot back to take this photo because it came in too close for me to even focus on. So that's something else I kind of want to mention. As a beginner, you're really not. It's tough to get close to things, and learning the different behavior of the wildlife you're going after can really help you kind of learn and anticipate how to get closer to things and in better position. So here's a deer I took many years ago. I mean, it's not even facing me. I don't even know why I shared this, but apparently I did. And here's one that I took last year. So, learning their behavior, getting myself into position. So there's a lot of different things that went into making this photo so much different than the previous one. But one of the main things is being able to get close and understanding how to move around and get close to the wildlife. So, spending a lot of time out in the field can really help you do that, and spending a lot of time with your target wildlife and learning their behavior and trying to start figure out how they are naturally can really help you in figuring those things out. And here's another example of this beautiful buck, and he walked right up to me. It was actually a little intimidating. He was so close during the rut, but he eventually just kind of walked away. Zafir asks, what's the most you guys crop? I know you said it before, and does it matter between full frame and APC, so crop sensor, on how much you crop? For me, I just want to be able to share the image online, obviously, but you can always crop a little bit more, especially if you're doing like an Instagram post, you can crop the hell out of it. But for me, I don't want to crop the image too crazy and lose some of the detail that's there, So that's the main thing for me. I would say probably like a 40% crop is absolute max, but probably like, on average 20 to 30% would be the most I would crop on an image, and I usually like to try and crop a little bit less if I've positioned myself properly. Scott, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and so I don't know, and I'm not a tech nerd, so I don't know on full frame to APS, overall megapixels available will allow you to crop more. So some cameras, like the new D850, have a ton of megapixels available. So even though it's a full frame camera, you can probably crop that down a little bit more. Whereas a camera that might only be like 12 or 16 megapixels, it would probably be tougher to crop. But a lot of it is quality of the body and the sensor inside. So there's a lot of other factors that go into it. If you get a super sharp focus on a bird, you can crop a little bit more and sometimes get away with it. But yeah, I would just say, like Ray said, the idea is to get as little crop. I normally shoot the bird in the center, so I'm not composing in camera, because especially with songbirds, it's really tough. You can do it with some waterfowl and some shorebirds and waders, especially, you can compose in camera. But keeping the bird in the middle and then kind of composing later to adjust it and get the composition you want, normally that takes about a 20 to 30% crop right off the bat. And every now and then you'll get it right in the camera where you're only cropping 5 or 10%.
Yes, yeah, totally correct. Couple more questions, and I just want to mention something about that crop too. It definitely depends on the resolution, and keep in mind, the cameras I've been using, the camera I'm currently using is only a 16 megapixel camera, and the camera I was using prior to that was 12 megapixel, and I used that for years. So the amount of resolution that I have to deal with is not a ton compared to, say, these really up-to-date, sorry about that, guys, these more modern, really high resolution cameras give you a ton of cropping power. But here's an example on the screen where cropping, so this left image I cropped more, and this is an old image, and the bird is actually larger in the frame than this pair is on the right. But just because it's closer and you cropped it more doesn't mean it's a good image. So perspective and light made the big difference here. So also the bird's position. So this bird on the left here, facing away, I'm shooting down on it. It actually looks like I missed focus on the head. I focused on the back there. The light isn't horrible, but it's definitely not great. So there's a lot of things about this photo that make it not ideal, and that was a beginner shot. Whereas this photo, eye level, smooth foreground, smooth background, the light is about as good as it gets. And even though the birds are smaller in the frame, it's still a much better image in my opinion. And that's definitely the next topic that we want to start talking about, but I just wanted to hit a couple more comments here. Dave asks, do you use a 1.4 extender? I use mine very minimally, only when I have to. I really don't personally like the quality of it. Scott, I think you're the same, right?
Yeah, I use it. It pairs for whatever reason on my 300 2.8. It pairs pretty well, but on my 500 f4, I don't like it as much. If the performance was great, I probably would be tempted to use it a little bit more, but I don't find it focuses as quick and as accurately.
Yep, same here. And Didi mentions, it seems then that the location is as crucial as lighting. If I keep coming home with warblers on massive branches, herons with reeds in the way and muddy backgrounds, I need to change my location. That is a perfect point. The location difference between this photo and this photo is actually many states, because this one was taken in New Jersey and this was taken in Florida. But having that location that gives you the different backgrounds and the overall setting that you're looking for, in addition to lighting, in addition to paying attention to your foreground and background, in addition to watching your perspective, it all comes together. So that's a great point. And yeah, definitely. Let's start talking about perspective a little bit here. And
Yep.
I'll just hit one more image that talks about, or two more, and then I'll hand it over to Scott, who has a few examples of that. So here's a great example of my first time down in Florida photographing a pelican, brown pelican flying over the water. I was standing on the top of the dock, shooting down on it, and it's not horrible. The light is not great, but you can see how they fly low over the water. Well, once I really learned that and wanted to showcase that, I actually got water level. Now you can actually see underneath the wingtips there. You can see how low it's flying. The light is much more flattering. The background is much farther away. So, the comparison between those two is, again, kind of night and day. Just a huge difference there. And a big part of it, in addition to lighting, is perspective on this one. And lastly, here's a shot that we, both Scott and I, photograph a lot. It's Barnegat Light on the New Jersey coast, and it's a jetty. So you're up on the top of the rocks, and this is how, especially beginners, but the majority of people there photograph these harlequin ducks. They're beautiful ducks, but you stand on the top of the jetty looking down as they're sitting on the rocks at the water level, and you just shoot down on them. The water's really close in the background. Again, this isn't the best lighting, but you can see the perspective isn't great there. Well, now when I get myself a little bit lower and get the background a little bit further away, I start to get much better background separation. I'm paying attention to my lighting a little bit more here. And then to take it a step further, now I start going in waterproof clothing and climbing down onto the rocks and getting really low. Now, here's one where the lighting isn't quite as flattering as the previous one, but it's still not horrible. I don't have any really bad shadows. But the perspective is what makes this. This feels like you're laying in the water next to this duck or almost swimming with it. You have the actual horizon in the background, and the difference in those three images is just hopefully obvious and astounding to you guys, especially if you're a beginner, just to kind of notice the difference from shooting down to getting eye level and getting that connection with the bird, and then introducing some horizon to it. All right, so
Yeah, and just a caveat, don't like if you're at Barnegat for the first time, don't go climbing down to the edge of the water
dangerous.
and then blaming Ray when all of your stuff falls in, because it can actually be. I wish Curram we have a picture of Curram who was down there this year.
I can,
and it's like a monsoon.
Yeah, I can bring that up.
That he's standing in, and it's a pretty epic picture, but it can be really treacherous at times there. So yeah, definitely. I always recommend for people that aren't familiar with it to go with somebody else and really just be careful.
Yeah, that's a great point. The shot is not necessarily always worth, what you're going to go through to get it sometimes. So stay safe out there for sure. That's always the first most important thing. So Scott, it's back on your screen. So if you want to take it away.
Yep. So a couple songbird perspective and background. I kind of lump these together. I've got backgrounds and perspectives that are awful here. So this was this was my first warbler season in 2014, black and white warbler. A typical shot. I like this as an example of a typical shot. We see these birds and we're shooting up all the time. Now I wouldn't even take this picture, even if the background was great, just because of the perspective. This is a much better image, eye level. And here's another black and white eye level. Common yellowthroat. The background on this isn't great. This is a better example of a really cluttered background, even though the perspective here is good. And then I had this. These are my latest batches from last year. I haven't shot any this year yet. I don't think I've seen one this year, but this was a batch from last year. Again, all eye level. The backgrounds are much smoother. This is a few years ago. Again, perspective isn't great. The light here is actually not bad. You could see a nice quality of light, but when you look at the perspective, the leaves are in the way. The background's not real pleasing. And then last year, actually 2 years ago, I got a
Nice.
batch of these yellow warblers. I got these in Wisconsin. I was out on a business trip and I snuck out one afternoon, and the light wasn't too bad. So I was able to get a few. This was a chestnut-sided warbler. Again, typical of a first-year shooter. See the bird overhead, shoot it. I'm in an area here which is, and chestnut-sided warblers do come down low. They don't necessarily live in the high trees. Yeah, you can get them down in some lower stuff. So after a couple years, these are the images that I was able to get with the chestnut-sided, and then just a few more scarlet tanager. First scarlet tanager I ever really got a good picture of. Well, at the time was a good picture of, but again, it's just a belly shot over my head. And then here's a scarlet tanager from last year that I really love. Again, eye level. A lot of people ask, like, how do you get eye level pictures of songbirds? And I've said this a couple times. I'll just repeat it because I saw a comment that alluded to this earlier. This is the top of some low shrubs, and you can see this is the top of a plant. So if you're at elevation, in other words, you're at a higher point and the trees are growing from below you, so you're up on a hill and there's trees below you, you have a much better shot at these types of images. And then any kind of an opening where there's secondary growth. So there's a lot of big trees to the left and the right, and then there's, for whatever reason, it's been clear cut, it's been logged, it's a road, whatever, there's secondary growth coming up. The birds sometimes will pop down onto that lower growth, and then it'll allow you some better images. Here's a black-throated blue, one of the first ones I ever got, taken from below. And then I got a whole bunch of these last year. I was pretty fortunate to get some good images.
That's awesome.
Here's the Barnegat. Here's the Barnegat jetty example.
Yeah, perfect.
Shooting down. Yeah, this is the day we met Ray. I almost stepped on Ray.
Yeah.
So the day we met, I thought I was the only one on the jetty, and I'm going out to get this harlequin. And I see this idiot down there in a bunch of camouflaged wedged in between the rocks, and I almost stepped on him. And then I felt really bad, so I started to apologize to him. And he was so nice about it. He's like, no, don't worry about it, man. Just come down and let's shoot together. So ever since then,
yep,
we've been hanging out.
Nice.
And then this is last year's same duck, much better perspective. And I'll go to one more example. This is an oyster catcher, first year oyster catcher. Perspective, just really not great, shooting from behind the bird. And then this is last year's. Yeah. A lot of this, and understand that Ray and I shoot a lot. So I have a job that offers me flexibility. Ray has a job that offers him flexibility. We're not necessarily professional full-time wildlife photographers, but it is tough when you don't have as much time as we have to go out and get images. So, don't get discouraged thinking it'll never happen. It will. It might take a little bit more work. And especially when you talk about the light and getting the right light, sometimes it means getting up at 3:30.
Yeah.
And if you've worked 9 to 5 Monday through Friday and you get 2 days off, getting up at 3:30 in the morning on a Saturday isn't real appealing. But sometimes that's the requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of questions came in. Don asked, do you normally scout a location, then go back at a later time and wait for the subject? Don, it's definitely a mix of both. So there's plenty of times I spent a couple days ago, I was out, I shot in the morning, and then as soon as the light became harsh, it's scouting time. So I hit 3 or 4 different locations scouting for, nice backgrounds and good habitat for some shorebirds. And, I didn't even bring a camera with me because I knew there was not going to be any birds there, or the light was going to be so bad I wasn't going to take a shot. So, that was definitely just a scouting trip. But there's other times where, you just kind of do some online research and then go out and find something. And then Dave Watson asks, do you guys worry about ticks when lying down all the time? It's always a concern for sure, Dave, and they're definitely prevalent in our area in southern New Jersey and in PA where Scott is. But for me, I don't like spraying all the kind of chemicals on myself that can kill them. So what I actually do, and I recommend to everybody I talk to, is I wear slick rainproof pants. Mine are from Colombia, but you can get them from anywhere. And that material, for whatever reason, ticks either do not want to or cannot hold on to it. And I crawl through some of the most tick-infested areas and come out with no ticks on me. I still always check myself thoroughly as soon as I get back to the car. Because, I still can occasionally pick them up. It's not like 100% preventative, but for what I go through, the habitats that I crawl through with how many ticks I actually get, it works amazingly well. So I highly recommend that. And let's see. Zafir says, when you can't get the reach, you more than make up for it with composition and including the environment. That's a great point. I certainly tried to do that. And Scott, anything else you want to talk to about perspective here? If not, we'll just try and.
No, I will say I never wear shorts ever in the summer if
Yeah.
I'm doing wildlife. I have really lightweight pants that I tuck into my socks, and I do get ticks once in a while. I despise mosquitoes and ticks. Like, I absolutely hate them. So the weird thing is, in the seasons where they're prevalent, I just naturally end up shooting from my car more.
Yeah.
But I do have like a mosquito mask that I put over my face if I'm going to be out in the woods for any long period of time. But I don't go in a ton of these high grass areas because that's not where a lot of songbirds live. And in the spring and the early summer, that's generally what I'm shooting. And then we're shooting shorebirds in the summer. So there's not, we're not worried too much about ticks. I will tell you, last year I was with Ray. Oh, there's the Curram picture.
Yeah, so here's Curram on Barnegat Jetty just getting crushed by waves there. So you can see when the surf is like that, sometimes it can be dangerous. So go ahead and you can finish that story, Scott. I'm going to switch back.
Yeah, and then I was with Ray last year, and I'm convinced I got chiggers.
Yeah.
And this is something you never want to get. I didn't realize they were in New Jersey, but they are. And I'd been sitting on an old log to get comfortable on the edge of the water, and I didn't think anything about it. And for a month, I had these bites all over me, and that was pretty awful. So yeah, it's more than just ticks. There's other stuff out there.
Yep. All right, a couple last points I want to hit here. Here's a loggerhead shrike I photographed in Florida. That's one of the first ones I ever did. These birds are commonly found on wire. So as a beginner, if you're going to photograph a bird on a wire, this is the way to do it. Find an interesting background, interesting light, make it more interesting. This was just a bird on a wire in bright, harsh sun with a blue background, and the head angle isn't even great because you can't even see the eyes. This was taken just after the sun dipped below the horizon, and great detail, great light, nice and close. I used my car as a blind to approach really close. So, learning different ways of photographing it. And then here's one I took on a natural perch in beautiful light. So that's one of my most favorite images of that. So those are things to think about. Motion blur is something that's an accidental one before I knew what the heck I was doing. Here is one that is purposeful. So you can see big difference there. Sharp head, the wing blur actually makes sense. Here's another one, sharp head, the wing blur actually makes sense. Got some motion in the background. So that's something to keep in mind. And one other beginner mistake that I know I found myself doing all the time was sharing everything. So self-curation is very important. It's all too easy when you come back from an outing, you've taken all these photos and you had a great time. It's way too easy to just share everything. And here's an example. Back in, 2010, one of my probably first outings to Barnegat Light, I was so excited with all these birds that I saw. I came back and I shared all of these photos, every one of these. So when you look at these as a set, it's just not ideal. There's just a ton of bad direction, bad light. I showed up at 9:30 a.m., which is just horrible on a clear day. The light was harsh as soon as I arrived, so I had no hope of getting really good light there. Many of the perspectives are bad. The birds are flying away. But if out of this set, I really dig deep and curate that and pick out just the best, and let me just filter that for you guys real quick here. And let's take a look at this set. So here's one of each species instead of, 4 or 5. And as a set, this looks way better now. I mean, these photos still are not ideal, not great light, not the best foreground there. This one's nice perspective, not the best perspective. But as a set, this compared to all of these photos is just wildly different. So as a beginner, fight the urge to share everything and just share your best, and your overall photography portfolio will thank you for it. So that's something I definitely wanted to mention. Scott, you have any other points you want to hit before we kind of wrap things up and do our portfolio reviews?
If you want to jump on my screen, I do want to show one thing, because this is a really, really common. This is almost like bird photography 101. Center compositions are typical of people just starting out, really not ideal. So just take a look at your composition. I'm sharing an image that is like one of the first waders I ever took a picture of. Just smacked it square in the middle of the frame. And then, just the composition over here is much better with room over there. And it's just a tremendously better image. But again, try to avoid these center crops. Just read about composition rules. I think maybe when we post this on YouTube, there's a video that we could link from somebody who helps us out with the wildlife photography critique. He did a really nice guide on compositions. It's about 10 or 15 minutes. So Steve Kirsting did that, and I thought it was a pretty nice job on it.
Yeah.
That explained some different rules on composition.
All right, cool. So, just as an overview here before, stay tuned, guys. We're actually going to do, 2 people submitted their portfolios to us, so we're just going to do a portfolio review of those and kind of give a little critique on each of those portfolios. So, definitely stay tuned on with us here. But just to kind of wrap things up, as a beginner, try to pay attention to your light as much as possible. Try to pay attention to your perspective. Try to pay attention to the bird's position. Watch your foreground, your background. Try not to overshare. And basically, the biggest thing I can say is try to think about these things while you're shooting. Try not to fall into the trap of just seeing a subject and pointing and shooting thoughtlessly, because we all fall into that. And like I said, I still do myself these days. But as soon as I do that, I try to catch myself and realize what I'm doing, and then actually start thinking about all the different things that are going into creating these images, or capturing these images, I should say. And that can make a big difference for you. Scott, you have anything else you want to add in the kind of wrap up there?
No, I mean, we're almost up against an hour.
Yeah.
There's actually more. I think we could have done an hour and a half on
Yeah.
this one. We left out a couple topics, so just a couple things to think about. Processing. Beginners a lot of times think that more is better. So when it comes to sharpening, noise reduction, saturation, those are the big 3. A lot of times you're going to see images that are just baked, and as soon as you get if you zoom in at all on the picture, you're just like, wow, that's scary. So if you're just starting out, be very cautious with sharpening, noise reduction, and saturation, especially when you're doing it globally to the whole image.
Yeah, that's a great point. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for all the great comments today. You guys were great with the comments and questions, which is, I think, why we went a little longer, but that's great because we've really been looking forward to this interaction. So when we announced this episode, we asked for users to submit their portfolios for us to review their portfolios. So, and we chose 2 of them here to go over, and we're probably going to have to go through them a little bit quicker here since we are running long. But thank you to everyone who submitted. And sorry, obviously we don't have enough time to go through all of them, but we will hopefully be doing this again in the future, and we'll keep that list of everyone that submitted and pick 2 different ones the next time we do this. So I think you have the same one up here, Scott. So we'll start with Samuel Block. He is a Finnish photographer, I believe, from Finland. So I just hit his wildlife portfolio here. He has a couple of other ones, so I'm just going to stick with wildlife since that's obviously our topic. And let's get started here looking through. The one thing I wanted to mention for you, Samuel, right off the bat is I love that you can click to view the image larger here, which is definitely an advantage. But one thing I noticed navigationally on your portfolio is I don't see a way of easily clicking through the images once you're viewing one large. So I have to click one to open it, close it, and then click another one to open it. So I think if you have any way of just kind of having little arrows or just even keyboard navigation to kind of scroll through them, that can be a nice thing for your portfolio. That being said, you've got some great images here. This king eider is great. Nice use of slower shutter speed with the motion blur there. The blue tit up here, I think that's what that is just a stellar image. Really nice, like, complementary background there. The gull here, while not a bad photo, it doesn't stand up to the rest of yours, and I think that this one could just probably go in the overall set here. Here's either dawn or dusk, either before sunrise or after sunset shot. Absolutely love it. Great motion blur on the eider there. Lovely bokeh in the background. It's just a really impressive image that kind of stands out to me. I really like that one. And, probably some really strong sun here, but you worked a wonderfully dark background into it, and you have some nice drama here. I almost actually like how the bird kind of almost blends into the background on this image. This, I think it's a great gray. Is just incredible. Beautiful composition, gorgeous soft light. I'd love to see a little bit more lightning in the eyes there, but just a really good image. And then we hit this one. So great behavior. I like your composition. Nice out of focus foreground. The background's slightly light and distracting, but the lighting isn't there for me. There's no light in the eye there. And again, compared to your other images, I'd say that's a weak link in the set. Beautiful composition. Nice use of tough light. Like there's no light in the eyes and on the head here, but I don't think it matters one bit on this one. Because it's all about the shape of this bird, and your black and white conversion makes it even more about that shape. I want to say Stellar's eider. I'm not great with these eider species. Another beautiful image here. Again, this one, not sure of the species, but the light is strong. Background's a little distracting. It kind of stands out from your set here. Great clean waterfowl with the mallard there. Nice high key Dunlin here. Beautiful close-up portrait. All right, this one. I did want to talk about this one. I absolutely love this image, except for the wing clip. That one just kills it for me there, man. You have like some amazing light here. The wing position is just incredible. The bokeh is amazing back there with the little reflections off the highlight points on the waves. But that wing clip, man, I'm sorry. It's so close. It's so close. But I think that's got to go. You either need all the wing in there, or it's got to be so tight that like everything's clipped. So maybe if you crop a vertical out of it and clip both wings, it might work a little bit better. But just having the one wing clip there, just it falls down for me. Again, another little bit busy. The background's kind of hot there. I like the habitat for these. I think purple sandpipers you have here. It's classic habitat for them, but the lighting is falling short there. So I think overall you just have like a couple of images in this portfolio that bring the whole thing down. And that's kind of what I was talking about a little bit ago to these beginner photographers is, and not that you're a beginner, but curation is all important. I've heard it said before, you're only as good as your worst image in your portfolio. And, I think that you have a couple of images that bring your overall portfolio down. Amazing. I love it. Great light. Pull that one. Unfortunately, pull that one. I would say this one here with the light not being ideal, that one. And lastly, this one. And I think your images are spectacular there. Scott, anything you wanted to add, or did you want to hit our next portfolio?
It's funny. I'm just going to throw a couple things on here. I actually agreed. Ray and I didn't talk about this before.
Oh, yeah.
I think I agreed on every single image.
Nice.
I earmarked like 5. Flip over to my screen, Ray, real quick.
You got it.
I want to show a couple. I actually there's a link to his Flickr. If it was me, I would take the 5 or 6 exactly the same ones. Now, I don't know why this isn't in the gallery, because I love this.
Yeah, that's got to be there.
I like this a lot. Really
Beautiful.
soft, and the complementary colors are almost like mirrored, so
That's great.
like the same images in the bird are kind of reflected down here. Snow on the branch. I really like that one. I love the peekaboo. This is a pretty common. We don't get them in the United States,
yeah.
but I see a lot of these. I guess they're probably a little easier to photograph, and they pose and do cool things. But I liked this peekaboo.
Yep.
I liked this one. This is a shot I normally would not like.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It only works because it's a long-tailed duck.
Yeah.
So it's almost like this is the feature of the image, not the fact that it's going away. 9 out of 10 times, these go in the dumpster. I actually liked this. And I liked
Nice
this
barnacle.
better than the low-angled worm shot that was in the portfolio.
Yes.
Again, I don't know that these are all getting thrown in the gallery for me, but especially this first one, I really liked that.
For sure.
Yeah. Composition on that's just spot on. It's beautiful.
So great stuff, man. I'm real quick. I'm going to flip back to my screen just to show. Someone asked to see the orange bird, and I think it's a bullfinch. So there, I just wanted to enlarge that for you real quick, just so you can see it. And another great image. Real nice complementary light, nice clean perch, nice and close and detailed. So kudos to you. So you have a ton of great images in here. Nice variety too in the portfolio. It's not very one-sided with one species or one type of bird. You got lots of different habitat there. So nice job. I think clean it up just a little bit there. It'll look even better. And thank you so much for submitting. And over to your screen, Scott. So we're gonna hit the next guy, Kyle.
Yeah. So I actually know Kyle a little bit. I've talked to him on social media. he's a little bit like me in terms of I think he's a pretty avid birder. So sometimes it's really tough when you're a birder and you're putting together a gallery because so much of you wants to include cool species that may not be cool images. So a couple of images that I really liked of Kyle's. So he had a couple peregrines. I thought it was a little redundant, but the light on these guys was gorgeous.
Yeah,
so
it's really nice.
here's one. And then the one that I liked a little bit more, oh, I got to jump back to his favorites. This one, I actually like this one a lot.
Yeah.
As a close, tight shot. I'll scroll through here real quick. Great gray owl, nice, really nice. This one's gorgeous. Looks like a subadult eagle coming in. Let me go the other way because there was a couple that I would just challenge a little bit as part of the overall set. The hummingbird's really nice.
Really nice.
This one I think this was the example I had of the birder shot. So this is my guess is a pretty cool bird.
It's a petrel.
Josh Galicki can give us an ID on this pretty quickly because I'm not sure.
Actually, it might be a shearwater. Might be like a great shearwater.
Shearwater is what I was guessing, but there's a bunch of different species and I can't tell them apart. Yeah. So, but this is not one that I would say feels artistic. It feels field guidey. So that might go. But then this one's really nice light.
Great.
Yeah, like look at the light on that thing, and really great perspective. This is a shot that I would definitely consider, a strong image if it was in my portfolio. Great gray down low, some interaction with the oyster catcher, another peregrine. This one I did not love. I know it's a snowy owl, and again, I think it's one of those things where it's a cool bird, and it's a great experience. Photographically, it just doesn't deliver for me. And it's not that it's bad. There's probably a bunch of people on the call that would say, God, I'd love to get a snowy owl picture like this. But when you compare it to the other images, the image, it doesn't hold up as much as it's just a really cool encounter in species. This guy looks like he's been in a battle. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's an awesome
I'm guessing. Yeah, I'm guessing he's on carrion or something like that. And Kyle was lucky enough to get him there. But you could see the blood just dripping off of his beak and around his head. So, yeah, pretty solid work overall. I would say, again, the temptation just to kind of avoid a couple of those images that might have been cool experiences and cool birds. And, better to show maybe 10 of your best images than 14. And those other 4 just aren't really photographically aren't great. So you just have to make a decision between the birder in you and the photographer in you.
You got it, man. All right, everyone. So anything else you want to hit on this, Scott, or are you good to go?
No, we got to do you want to go over the next call, what the subject is?
We got May 9th coming up, and our good friend Adam will be joining us, and it's going to be all about owls. Adam is a great owl photographer out in the Pacific Northwest, and he'll be joining us to show some of his amazing images from out there, as well as talk a little bit about his approach to finding them and photographing them. And that'll be good because, I think Scott's with me on this, but I personally hate owls. I can't find the damn things half the time. So they're a tough species, so it'll be great to get a little bit of insight from someone who has a little bit more experience photographing them.
Yeah, and because it's just a single topic, it might be a little bit shorter. We'll probably try to throw something in. We may do another either edit type thing at the end of that one, or possibly another portfolio review, or live critique. I think we'll have some extra time on that. So yeah, we'll look forward. We'll put something out on Facebook that'll give some direction if we need some feedback from the audience.
So it's 2 Wednesdays from now. That's May 9th. So thank you everyone for sticking with us. I know tonight went a little bit longer, but a lot of you stayed put, and we really appreciate your time, and we really appreciate all of your comments tonight. You guys were great.
Yeah.
And we had a fun time showing you some of our worst images from the past. So thanks for not being too brutal on us. We appreciate it. Everyone have a great night, and we look forward to having you next time.
All right. Good night, guys.